Oh, hi there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan and I was just in my backyard throwing some Kaminoans into the good old-fashioned wood chipper. Apparently their nutritious flesh is something my tomatoes love. Anyway, recently we've been talking a lot about Space Marines. We did an entire series that rated some of the major Space Marines in science fiction. And throughout this experience, me and Ben heavily debated what we think makes a Space Marine, and you the fans also gave us your opinions as well. Our definition is simple. A Space Marine, like most normal Marines, have a strong sense of duty to protect those who they serve and those who serve alongside them. These are men and women who do not shy away from combat but greet death as a certainty that they are okay with expediting as long as it means that they take out a few filthy Xenos or whatever terrible enemy mankind is facing on that particular day. A Space Marine, by our definition, is not about which organization you belong to, or what rank you have, or what badge you've earned. It's not about how awesome your armor or chainsaw-equipped rifle is, although that is really cool. It's more about who you are as a human being and how willing you are to help your fellow man out, and how much you're willing to sacrifice to preserve our species. A Space Marine is not born, but created in the fiery forge of combat and great sacrifice. Which is why I like thinking that every human being has a tiny little Space Marine man inside of them with tiny little Space Marine hands holding a tiny little Space Marine rifle, wearing a tiny little Space Marine helmet, just dying to get out there and curb stomp some godless dolphins. Anyway guys, today we're going to be looking at 7 individuals who fit our ultimate definition of what it means to be a Space Marine. Posthumously, because they all died. We're going to start our list with the prototypical Space Marine. We, of course, are talking about Mass Effect 3's Commander Shepard. Joking, that was a terrible ending for a video game, and we're not going to talk about it, okay? Instead, we're going to be talking about Sergeant Avery Johnson of the UNSC Marine Corps. This is a man who would feel at home in almost any war. If we follow the credo of the Fallout series that war never changes, well, Sergeant Avery Johnson also never changes. Ever. The man still listens to heavy metal during combat insertions in the 26th century. He survived several deadly missions that would have killed anything short of a Spartan 2, and it doesn't really make sense. He's just a human. Well, mostly human. He's technically a Spartan 1. But the modifications made to a Spartan 1 when compared to a Spartan 2 are basically just like vitamin shots. The veteran of countless wars, the 70-year-old Avery Johnson most likely sensed that his time was coming to an end in Halo 3. A Space Marine does not look forward to a peaceful death laying in bed surrounded by loved ones. That's because a Space Marine does not understand the concept of love. The only love Sergeant Johnson knows is the love he gives his enemy in the form of lead and punches to the face and groin. So even when the monitor known as the Guilty Spark fatally wounds the Sergeant with a laser blast to the chest, his love for his enemy drives his barely conscious body to fire back at the monitor, which is just enough of an opening to allow Master Chief to finish the job. Not satisfied with such an anticlimactic death, Avery Johnson demands to be left behind so that he can die when the Halo weapon blows up and takes out the dangerous Flood Gravemind. The Space Marine Sanguinus is known as the Great Angel because of the mutation that has grown giant wings on his back. He's not really all that human. But then again, he was a Primarch, one of the 20 sons of the Emperor, who himself has claimed that he's no god, but just a mere mortal man. And if the Emperor says that, well, it's good enough for me. Because I don't want my brain to turn into pudding. Leader of the Blood Angels, Sanguinus' Space Marines were one of the few left on Terra during the Horus Heresy, where a number of Space Marine legions fell to the dark influences of the Chaos Gods. Led by the fallen Primarch Horus, the forces of Chaos invaded Terra, seeking to destroy the Emperor of Mankind, the only individual the Chaos Gods were actually afraid of. In a last-ditch effort to destroy Horus, Sanguinus decides to confront his fallen brother. Heavily wounded and wary from his previous fights with gigantic flying demons that came from another dimension, which is really no big deal because this is Warhammer 40k, Sanguinus was completely ready to die. You see, he was a powerful psychic seer and already knew the fate that awaited him. Yet he still rushed forward to do as much damage to Horus as possible before the Emperor could finally arrive and fight him himself. Sanguinus is easily destroyed by the fallen Primarch, who makes sure that the Great Angel's death is so painful that his death reverberates through the psychic world. His end was so full of anguish that Sanguinus' chapter of Space Marines were driven insane by the psychic release of energy and went on a terrifying rampage that completely decimated the enemy lines. This psychic echo was so strong that it would corrupt all future Blood Angel gene seeds with 2 terrifying diseases. One was Red Thirst and the other was Black Rage. These diseases basically caused the victims to degenerate into madness and bloodlust. These Blood Angels inflicted with these maddening diseases were not treated but put into special suicide units. because this is Warhammer 40k. Ultimately, it was said that Sanguinus was able to delay Horus just long enough for the Emperor to arrive. Others say that Sanguinus even managed to pierce a small hole in Horus's armor, which the Emperor would later exploit in combat. Nonetheless, the Great Angel's heart was pure, and his ultimate defiance makes him a terrific example of what it takes to be a Space Marine in the Warhammer 40k universe, which is honestly a little over the top. I mean, their expectations are really high. Now, our two previous Space Marines were basically a shoo-in for a glorious, heroic death. I mean, some people are born heroes, and cowards like me can smell them from a mile away, and we usually try to avoid them because we know they will be surrounded by death and destruction. But heroes are not always so easily spotted. Sergeant Sugar Watkins was a pretty unassuming NCO. Tough and reliable, but not all that remarkable when compared to the rest of the mobile infantry. But when he was mortally wounded, he neither panicked or asked for medical assistance. Instead, he asked for a nuke so he could blow up the entire bug city, which is the only real cure to having your abdomen sliced open by a gigantic bug. Godspeed, Watkins. Godspeed. Society is constantly creating rules and regulations about what is acceptable behavior or not. These are parameters that cover everything from forcing us to wear pants in public to how we spend our money or how we should interact with other people. These social rules are usually as flawed as humanity itself, yet some of us still cling on them with foolish determination. Russell Casse was a casualty to these rules. He was an individual that society had deemed no longer desirable and unacceptable. Despite being a Vietnam War veteran and a loving, if not somewhat irresponsible father, society decided that his drinking habits and constant ranting about being abducted by anally fixated aliens made him weird and undesirable to be around. Yet, in the end, his drinking did not deter him from being able to fly a state-of-the-art F-18 Hornet straight into an alien city destroyer. His heroic sacrifice led to the beginning of the end for the alien invasion, and more importantly, it led to the widespread proliferation of American Independence Day as an international holiday. America. We learned from the case of Russell Casse that we should not judge a man by how much he drinks. Instead, we should judge a man by how well he flies a fighter jet while completely hammered. Now, when I say every human being has a small little Space Marine inside of them, you shouldn't worry and go to the doctor to get a CAT scan. It's really a metaphorical little Space Marine, man, and none of us really know when he'll come out. As a matter of fact, even the biggest coward might find their spine on the day of their reckoning. Such was the case of Private William Hudson. Due to be honorably discharged after the mission to Hadley's Hope, Hudson was more than a bit hysterical when the mission started spiraling out of control. Although, in his defense, aside from the constant moaning and complaining, he actually had the right idea most of the time. The best option for the Colonial Marines would have been to immediately get off the planet, leave their friends behind, and just nuke the entire place. In the end, Private Hudson is finally tested. He finds himself faced with multiple alien warriors charging at him. Hudson's flight and fight instincts kick in, and he learns that he's not a coward. And he is indeed a fighter. Perhaps not a good fighter. I mean, we're not really sure if he hits anything, but he did go down like a man. A man who then is raped by aliens, impregnated, and then dies when that alien baby bursts out of his chest. But Hudson, being a Space Marine, eventually regroups in hell and then reincarnates as Master Sergeant Farrell in Edge of Tomorrow. Officially speaking, Spartans never die. But the truth is, besides Master Chief and his constant plot armor and Cortana protecting him, Spartans died all the time, even Spartan 2s. They died in training. They died falling out of ships without parachutes. They died from gluten allergies. They died when they got shot in the head, and they died when the planet they were standing on got glassed by the Covenant. They might have had more protection than your average UNSC grunt, but they also went into the most dangerous combat scenarios. But what really separates a Spartan from the rest of us is not just their genetic modifications, but their superior mental discipline and strength. The toughest part of most Spartan 2's lives was most likely their bio-augmentation phase, when their bodies underwent an incredibly difficult process where it was basically ripped apart and rebuilt into the super soldiers they would become. You see, a person's mind and willingness to survive plays a large part in whether they'll survive an operation, a disease, or a recovery. It's why studies show that when individuals retire, they're more likely to pass away compared to an individual who continues to work and has structure, drive, and focus. It's that mental toughness that provides the extra support the Spartans need to survive this grueling operation. And for those Spartans that did survive the augmentation process, the battlefield was relatively simple and easy to deal with in comparison. Jorge 52 is a Spartan 2, and like all Spartan 2s, he was abducted from a young age and pressed into service. Like all Spartan 2s, he was an inspiration on the battlefield, a natural leader against the alien threat. So when he was given a chance to save his homeworld of Reach, one of the last bastions of humanity before Covenant reaches Earth itself, Jorge 52 did not shirk from duty, but rushed at the chance to carry a slipstream bomb into the heart of a Covenant supercarrier. In the end, his sacrifice would prove to be pointless because Covenant reinforcements would arrive and they would glass the planet. But his sacrifice and the sacrifice of many men and women in the war against the Covenant was the only reason why humanity was able to defeat such a technologically superior foe. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a heavily armed bro inside of a suit of armor. I get it. Growing up, football was a huge part of my life. And I really enjoyed this certain subculture some might call today toxic masculinity. But to me, it was always a guilty pleasure of mine to indulge in that primal urge to just lay people out and establish that I am physically superior and just a better human being. Now that I'm older, wiser, and a bigger pussy, I realize just how one-dimensional that culture was. I realized how much of the rest of the world I was missing out on. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with a bro encased in protective armor. It's just that if you let that armor fully block out the rest of the world and all the beautiful things in it, and simultaneously keep all your own emotions and feelings bottled up inside for no one else to see, your personal growth as a human being will be stunted and you will turn into a very boring and annoying individual to be around. That is the fundamental problem with Gears of War and the main character Marcus Phoenix. He's just a boring dude who smashes things. That's why Dom Santiago has always been, in my opinion, the most important character in the franchise. Dom Santiago is not only a badass, but he also has a heart and desires that go beyond just killing things. You see, he is what makes the entire narrative so compelling, because Dom embodies what it means to be human, and after all, they're trying to save humanity. Or serenity, or whatever they're called. It was Dom's pursuit of his wife Maria that drove the narrative just as much as the awesome gunplay. And it was Dom finally finding his wife that broke our hearts and broke him. In the end, without Maria, Dom's sole purpose in life wasn't about being loyal to the cog or even trying to save humanity. The only thing he had left when he lost Maria was his friend Marcus, which is basically the male version of the name Maria, Marcus. Ultimately, what this means is when he was given the opportunity to embrace death in order to save Marcus Phoenix, he does so willingly. Because unlike with Maria, this time Dom had a chance to make a difference. Well, actually, Dom kind of euthanizes Maria by shooting her in the head, and she's definitely in a bad way, but, malnutrition can be cured by food. So, yeah, that's what happens when you have too much testosterone, I think. It just leads to poor decision-making skills. Guys, I want to leave you off with this one message. Being a space marine is not just about dying in some heroic last stand or gigantic explosion. It's more about how you carry yourself as a human being and how you treat your fellow man. So, being a space marine can be something as simple as volunteering at a local soup kitchen to help the poor or homeless, or, helping out that one kid who's being picked on by the rest of the class, or spotting a six-pack's rings in the recycling bin and taking it out and throwing it into the ocean, because it's basically like a landmine for dolphins and prevents them from coming ashore. It's those small things that really helps out humanity. That's what makes us all space marines. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie, and you are the protagonist. #humanity first.